Okay, good afternoon. My name is Dongjin Kim. I am Irish School of Ecumenics Senior Research Fellow in Peace and Reconciliation Studies. The ISC at 50 webinar will start soon. Please note that this event will be recorded, and please mute your microphone during the webinar for the best sound quality. The webinar will begin with the welcome remarks by Dermot McCarthy, Chair of the ISC Trust Steering Committee, followed by the roundtable panel discussion chaired by Jude Fernando, Associate Professor, Trinity College Dublin. As usual, the ISC at 50 webinar panel discussion will be in 3 rounds. The first round on panel members' views on the topic, focusing on opportunities and challenges. The second on how to address and overcome the challenges. And finally, an open discussion where we invite the audience to utilize the chat function to raise comment and questions. Please be mindful that for the sake of timekeeping, we would really appreciate it if you use just the chat function for your questions and comments to the panel members. I will assist Jude in facilitating the third round discussion and make sure that what you contribute in the chat box will be reflected not only in the discussion today, but also in the ongoing ISC at 50 program for peace and reconciliation. And now over to you, Dermot.
Thanks very much, Jen, and it's a great pleasure again to welcome people to this important and I think timely webinar, which brings us together. So in a sense, the subtitle for our session, Belonging and Going Beyond, is appropriate. I think for many people now, there's been the opportunity to develop a sense of belonging through Jen's efforts in organizing this series of very timely and topical encounters, and also going beyond, because of course we have passed the threshold of the end of the 50th year of the ISE, but the celebrations continue, and why shouldn't they? So it is, I think, a topic that would be very close to Michael Harley's heart that we're addressing this evening with a very distinguished and capable panel. And without delaying their contributions any further, I'm delighted to hand over to Jude Lal to introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much, Dermot, and thank you very much, Jin. As you have already seen on the flyer, there is a very knowledgeable, experienced panel of speakers this evening with us. And the topic, as you are aware, is a topic that we have also integrated very deeply into the reconfiguration of the MPhil in contextual theologies and interfaith relations in the Irish School of Ecumenics, School of Religion in Trinity College Dublin. The engagement that we are going to have today, the conversation that we are going to have today, reflects the content of the program module. It is both academic and civic. At the same time, we try to engage in the efforts that build peace, justice, and reconciliation in the island of Ireland and beyond. Now, our first speaker is Adrian Christea, Executive Officer of Dublin City Interfaith Forum and alumni of the Irish School of Ecumenics. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Jude. Good evening, everyone. Delighted to be here among so many familiar faces and some unfamiliar faces. When Jude asked me to say a few words, he was knocking at an open door, because my paths have crossed so many times in so many different contexts with the Irish School of Ecumenics. So I'm delighted that we can keep continuing our our cooperation. So without, I'll just move straight into it because I know we're pressed by time. I was asked to perhaps give a context or a backdrop in terms of these fast changes that we witnessed over the last 3 decades in terms of our religious landscape here in Ireland. So it would be difficult to discuss the changes in the religious landscape if we don't make reference to the wider context of the demographic change in Ireland over the past 3 decades. This has been remarked in quite a number of studies of demography and society, tracing how Ireland became an increasingly diverse society over a relatively short period of time. So historically, a country of emigration. Now Ireland is a country of immigration. In 1991, only 6% of the population of Ireland was born outside of the state. And of this, only just over 40,000 had been born in countries that were neither UK nor the US. By 2016, we had over 535,000 non-Irish nationals who are living in Ireland. Between the period 2002 and 2011, for instance, the number of African-born residents in Ireland doubled from 26,000 to 54,000. The number of Asian-born residents trebled from 28,000 to almost 80,000. But the biggest impact was felt with the EU freedom to travel to work, and with the provision to open up to the new European EU accession states in 2004 and then in 2007. In 2007, I was asked to write an article highlighting the sudden change in this, or how this fast, I suppose, change in demographic impacted our religious landscape. So with a focus on the birth and spread of immigrant-led religious groups. Then in 2006, because I was using the 2006 census, 26 religions were listed, and they included the atheists, other stated religions, no religion, and not stated. It is interesting to note that among the fastest growing religions in Ireland were the Christian Apostolic or Pentecostal, with a growth rate of 157%. The other rates of change were among the Orthodox with 99% rate of growth, Hindu 96%, Atheist 85%, Lutheran 72%, and Muslim with 69%. A decade later, the 2016 census outlines significant changes in the responses to questions about religion. 78% of the population, or 3.7 million people, declaring themselves as Roman Catholic, a fall of 132,000 from the previous from 2011. Then the Catholic represented 84%. The second largest group in this category were those who declared no religion, and they were figuring at 10%, or just over 468,000, an increase of 6% from the previous census in 2011. But the fastest growing religions between the two censuses, 11 and 2016, in percentage terms were Orthodox, Hindu, and Muslim. Church of Ireland, Presbyterian, and Apostolic or Pentecostal all showed declines, but the category Other Christians showed the largest decline compared with 2011, a fall of 9.1%. So at a glance, 78% of the population declared themselves as Roman Catholics, or 3.7 million. We witnessed a reduction of 132,000 people compared to 2011, when Catholics represented 84%. Furthermore, 10% declare no religion, and this is the second largest group. In 2011, this category represented 6%, and an increase of nearly 200,000, 198 in the previous 5 years. So interesting to note that no religion in 1991 represented 2%, but in 2011 it grew 5 times, 10% in 2016. In 2010, I was still working with the Irish Council of Churches, and we started implementing a long-planned and a highly innovative project. We wanted to show how faith and city interaction can create positive change. And this project came out of the Irish Council of Churches principles for migrant diversity and interculturalism. These were devised by the Irish churches on both sides of the border in 2019. And I think this is something that the Irish School of Ecumenics can take credit, because I remember very well when Sister Geraldine Smith came out with the idea to call the principles affirmations. So the document is still there on the Irish Council of Churches, the Irish affirmations on migration, culturalism, and diversity. So this project that I was mentioning to earlier on is the beginning of the Dublin City Interfaith Forum. And it was a partnership between the Irish Council of Churches and the Dublin City Council. It's been a valuable journey with much nuanced negotiation, sensitive understanding, and active learning. It led us to navigate on the uncharted waters of finding appropriate balance and fair representation across multi-layered cultures and traditions. What appears insurmountable became possible as communities together. We agreed numbers of representatives from each faith community, while trying to ensure that the rich tapestry of each community's experience and traditions was apparent, while seeking the broad ethnic diversity that is now characterizing contemporary Dublin. People need to meet face to face, experience diversity, and discuss issues with people who differ. Communities who need to reach out to each other, as dialogue and exchange between people of different views, cultures, and faiths is the glue that holds us together and enriches us all. The catalyst for this project and this forum, as I said, was the partnership between the City Council and the Council of Churches, so 2 different councils, but unusual type of cooperation.
Adrian, we could talk about that interaction in the second part, if you could kindly conclude, identifying one major challenge.
So I suppose, although we have a committed group of people and who we actively engage in interfaith dialogue and participate in public meetings and activities, one question that we find ourselves asking all the time is whether we manage to reach others and identify those individuals and communities out there already doing the work unknown to us. Do they have the ability to engage with the forum as much as the forum may want? Preaching to the converted is a term that is bandied around our meetings. One of our challenges is trying to engage with those who do not want to be engaged and ensuring that they can be part of the conversation if they wish to be. Some may consider there is not a conversation to be had, or is the conversation the right one? And do people know about it? So these are some of the challenges that we identify on I suppose, on a regular basis.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Adrian. I would like to capture one word from what you said. It's an uncharted territory. And thank you so much. And the initiatives we can certainly discuss in the second round. And we go to our next speaker, Myozan Kodo Kilroy, who is a Zen Buddhist monk, a lecturer at the Technological University of Dublin. Thank you very much, Myozan, for accepting our invitation. Over to you now.
Thank you so much, Jude. Thank you to everyone in the ISE, and congratulations on reaching this significant milestone of 50 years. What a different world it is now, 50 years later. It seems to me, and I'd like to thank Adrian for setting up the landscape so ably and so well in his remarks. I'm just going to roll on and add to those remarks with some observations. The title today, Faiths in Changing Ireland, Belonging and Going Beyond, seems to have a number of elements to it. Faiths, number one. Number two, changing Ireland. Number three, belonging. And number four, going beyond. To address first the first part, faiths. Faiths in the plural, so a rich tapestry, a broad palette of experience is represented in this plurality. But drawing on what Adrian was saying as well, we also see that the growing number of people that are that have no religious affiliation whatsoever. We see this in the north and we see this in the south. We saw that in the recent poll findings in Northern Ireland, and we see it also in census figures in the Republic. So this is an all-island experience, north and south. We see a growing number of people that might define themselves as a-religious. So maybe we need to question the use of the term faith and consider a term like belief, because beliefs include both the atheistic and the a-religious, as well as the committed religious person from whatever tradition. So I think that a multi-belief Ireland is the Ireland that we are now living in. So it is a changing Ireland. To address the second part of the title, it is a changing Ireland. It's been changing for a long time. We can see, for example, even if we go back to 1869, we see the Irish Church Act, which disestablishes the Church of Ireland in Ireland. And then in 1972, we see the Fifth Amendment to the Irish Constitution, which removes the special place of the Catholic Church in Bunreacht na hÉireann, the Irish Constitution. So this has been a long and slow process following the vagaries of history and society within Ireland, north and south, as each decade passes. So we've reached a point now, I think. So that, I mean, that's 1972, the official special position of the Church. The Catholic Church is removed in the Irish Constitution. We've reached a point now that a thinker like Pierre Bourdieu might describe as one of hysteresis or hysteresis. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And what is this hysteresis or hysteresis? This is a situation where the realities on the ground have changed, but the practices of a previous state of affairs continue. So, for example, in Ireland now, we see the discourse around identity usually bedded into the idea of Christian identity. But the facts on the ground have changed considerably. Although the practices, so Bourdieu would of course describe it as the field, the dynamics of the field have changed, but the practices within the field, the religious field, have not changed. So we're in a situation where we don't have an established church, but we have the ghost of establishment still walking on the stage of religious affairs within the country. So how do we see this? We see this, for example, in the Dáil prayer. So in the South, we see, in the Republic, we see each session of the Dáil opens with a Christian prayer. In a Republic that is, you know, has people of many different religious backgrounds. We see it in chaplaincy in Ireland. We see that hospitals, universities, prisons, and other institutions have an exclusively Christian chaplaincy available to citizens, and so you wouldn't find that in the United Kingdom, and you wouldn't find it in the United States, for example, which both countries don't practice a kind of a hard secularism that France would. They have an approach more similar to the Irish approach, I would argue. But we see chaplains from other faith traditions or other belief traditions in these type of contexts. It's hard to believe that in Ireland we don't have a single Jewish, Muslim, or Buddhist chaplain in all these kind of contexts. We see this hysteresis also in culture. So the way that we articulate our culture, North and South, through the arts, through media, through other forms of expression, are ones that have an understanding whereby this is a Christian society in a Christian context. So we conceptualize the society in Northern Ireland as being one of two communities locked into a historic argument. And I think recent poll findings north of the border also show us that this is a changing dynamic. I won't go on for much longer. I know that we have a limited amount of time. I'll just paint these kind of observations and then finish. And I think in the South too, that maybe it's the inheritance of narratives around nationalism, that we define our identity in the arts, in media, and our self-identity as drawing on the long history and rich and valuable history of Christianity within Ireland, and sideline these other narratives around belonging. So I'm talking here about that third part, which is belonging, within the title of today's session. So I think that that obviously as a Buddhist, when I face these issues around chaplaincy, if I go to a hospital and I'm sick, or if one of our community is dying in the hospice in Ireland, or one of our community is looking for support in a chaplaincy context, there is a dearth of belonging in the way that we have set things up and continue to operate. So with an official disestablishment of the church, of both churches, one in 1869 and the other in 1972, if you will, there is unfinished business. And I think maybe that's the time for me to draw this to a close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mears. And yeah, there's an unfinished business. That's a great ending. Thank you for your insights, following on from Adrian's. Our third speaker is Kathleen Magabe, provincial leader of Our Lady of Apostles, and she's also an advisor to the Irish Catholic Bishops' Conference on Interfaith Relations. Over to you, Kathleen. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much, Jude, and good evening, everybody. So when I saw the topic, I thought best to speak from my own personal experience, and so 3 areas came to mind that I could just throw into the conversation here. And the first is, as a Catholic missionary. I'm a missionary, I spent a long time abroad. And as we know, Ireland was very much a mission-sending country, and particularly of Catholic missionaries. Between maybe 1920 and 1970, I think about 30,000 Irish men and women went to other parts of the world, to the poorer parts of the world, bringing their faith, bringing their charity, bringing their skills. And of course, that reflects a time when the faith was very strong here in this country. There are still some Irish missionaries abroad, but for the most part, missionary institutes, indeed like the whole church, is declining numbers and a rising age profile. And I was at a talk last night, and as David Begg said, like 50 years ago, our society was one of militant piety, and now it might be best described as characterized by military secularism. And so in terms of the opportunities and the challenges that presents, I just named 2. And the first one that I would say is that missionaries abroad, in Africa, in Asia, wherever, they go deep into these countries, they live among the people, usually for many years, inserted in the culture and in the community, and the relationship with the people that they live among is one of equality, and it's inspired by their faith and their commitment to what we would call as Christians God's reign of justice, peace, and love. And it's not dictated by the directives of any Western government. So I think a challenge in our overseas development today is to appreciate the role of faith in integral human development globally, both in the values that underpin, always did underpin missionary engagement of faith inspired, and also in an appreciation of and respect for the people, the faith of the people in other parts of the globe where we continue to work for development in terms of Irish aid going beyond. And just second point on mission is that in today's world, including here in Ireland, I think, as we grow a secular Ireland, as we say, there is a real hunger for meaning, belonging, love, compassion, peace, justice, relationship. I think there's still a great need for faith-inspired people to be in close relationship and in solidarity, especially with the marginalized. And that's also an opportunity for us as missionaries and indeed as church, find new ways of meaningful engagement here as well as abroad. The second area I wanted to talk about was of myself. Well, I'm a woman and I'm a female religious. As a woman religious, in the past 30 years in Ireland, many revelations of physical, sexual and emotional abuse, and also its concealment by the church. And this is, of course, still very much an open wound in our country. It affects victims, survivors, their families, the whole society, all of us, church, religious, priests, everybody. Institutional abuse in contexts such as mother and baby homes, Magdalene laundries, and orphanages, these, of course, refer particularly to women religious in this country. And so all of us feel a deep hurt, betrayal, and also a self-questioning. So I think it's safe to say that young people in Ireland, really under the age of 30, have not heard a positive thing about women religious. And that's not easy. And it's not because it's the truth. There is a lot of good to tell, as well as, of course, what is being told. So this is a challenge, and it's an opportunity for us as church and as women religious to continue to seek to bring healing to those who have been hurt, and also continue to bring healing to ourselves as women religious, to believe in our vocation, and to continue in ministry and fidelity to the God of love. And of course, another big question under this topic of women today in Ireland in terms of faith is the role of women in the church, and particularly the absence of women in decision-making. roles within that structure of the church. And women religious, we feel, we sense we belong to God. We also belong to the church, through which we find inspiration for our life and ministry. But we also, see that need to go beyond. And I think today that both these issues are being spoken of, that of the abuse and that of women in the church, indeed women in religions. It presents both a challenge and an opportunity for positive change. And just very briefly on the third topic, I would say I'm a woman who has been, as a missionary, mainly involved in interfaith engagement. And as you know, that the church in Ireland, you may or you may not know, but the church in Ireland and universally is at the moment in a synodal, what we call a synodal process, a time of listening, a time of conversation. And the hope is that this synodal process will help us, lead to a new way of being church in Ireland. And of course, that will only happen if we all engage with it. But as part of the synod process, we held conversations with people of other faiths. And that was held in Cork, Three Faith Forum, in Dublin City Interfaith Forum, and the Midwest Interfaith in Limerick, and was informal conversations in the North. And, for the most part, people of other faiths spoke about being well accepted here in Ireland. They didn't speak, they said there was some racism. I myself am aware that there is Islamophobia, but in fact, it didn't come up in our conversations. But through those conversations with people of other faiths, certain recommendations did come up. And one question that we looked at, which I think is a very important one, and I would be recommending that one is one that we continue, is on the role of faith communities in Ireland today. What is our role? How can we work together in fulfilling that role? So I leave it to the next part, Jude. I think I've run out of time, but in terms of recommendations, I'd refer to some of the things that arose there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Mio-san referred to lack of institutional representation of diverse faiths. And then, Kathleen, you referred to lack of representation of women in the churches, and also the yearning for meaning in the context of open wounds. Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Fatima Shifana Mohammed, a student at the School of Ecumenics who followed the MPhil in Intercultural Theology and Interreligious Studies, which has been renamed as Contextual Theologies and Interfaith Relations. Over to you, Shifana. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Jude. Okay. So I call Ireland my home. It's a place that has grown in my heart and replaced a home I never had. It's a place that speaks my language, which is neither Gaelic nor English. In this language, men and women, Palestinians, Tamils in Sri Lanka, oppressed religious minorities, indigenous people in South America, exploited workers, Dalits in India, and queer communities all around the world express themselves. Only the rebellious and the resilient know this language. Those who experience oppression speak of it as it's the expression of hope. So I speak the language of the people in Ireland who faced centuries of brutal colonization and resisted it with bravery and chivalry. As we speak, there is a protest going on at Aviva Stadium against international arms fair held at the location. The protest is a statement of keeping alive the Republic conscious, as Seamus Heaney calls it. Within that context, I understand both collective piety and impiety. In some countries like Sri Lanka, where I come from, religious identity is combined with racial identity, which has sharpened the Sinhala Buddhist population capable of unleashing senseless violence. In Hindutva India, the state and the people are conditioned by Hindu nationalism, which has genocidal impulses. Judaism and Christianity are used by Zionists and the Christians, and they are wiping out the Palestinians from their indigenous lands. Moreover, the US, UK, EU coalition in Afghanistan wanted to save the veiled women from the so-called bearded Muslim men. This raised the question of when saving your enemy's woman justifies invading a sovereign country. On the other hand, the mullahs in Iran have the right to dictate and make laws punishing women who refuse to wear the head cover, which is also known as hijab. Taking a cue from Afghanistan, the Iranian women informed the West that it is a matter of internal concern and will be dealt with internally. However, France serves as the flip side of the same coin. Muslim women all around the world have said that what they symbolize in our oppression is what we choose as a weapon of our resistance. In the case of ban on the face veil, we mark our resistance by wearing a face veil. As a result of privatizing our sexuality, we reject hegemonic body politics. We cover our heads, not our brains. We conceal our body, not our intellect. I look at the Irish faith landscape through this lens. Throughout the history of Ireland, religious organization and resistant leaders have interpreted faith to organize, mobilize people against colonization. In face of oppression, for them, it was more than just a place of belonging. It was a place where an alternative Ireland was collectively imagined. Therefore, religion, faith, and Ireland's future are inseparable. James Connolly is a devoted Catholic and a militant socialist and a staunch critic of the Church of Ireland. Once we get past dogmatism in religion, we see that religiosity and irreligiosity are defining factors of faith, but rather different way of embracing it. Faith is ambiguous, more accurately ambivalent. This is the challenge and the opportunity in the changing faiths in Ireland. It is interesting to see how Muslims adapt to this unique environment. There is no doubt that the most stereotyped species on the planet. Since the end of Cold War, Islam is seen not as one of the world's religion, but the most religious of all religions. This fits neatly with the secular fundamentalist narrative. Everything religious is violent, and Islam is the most violent. This leads to the justification of invading countries using the Christian just war theory. Islam does not have a just war theory, but it promotes lesser jihad and greater jihad. The greater jihad is a spiritual struggle to humanize relationship. The challenge is, rather than stereotyping one faith against another, to recognize this ambivalent character and utilize the best in every faith for the common good of humanity and the planet. Just like any other migrant, we come from different cultures, speak many languages, and have adapted to many customs. It's true that we have a lot to learn from Ireland, but Ireland also has a lot to learn from us. Our histories are interwoven with each other. It's only through mutual respect and understanding and comradeship that we can move forward as a united Ireland. One of the disturbing and demanding questions is, how can Ireland isolate itself from growing Islamophobia and xenophobia? There are indeed radicalizing elements in the world, but they don't operate in a vacuum. Despite overemphasizing the religious element, geopolitical policies and class factors in radicalization are completely overlooked. When alternative voices don't fit into the narrative promoted by certain class, they are cancelled within the popular discourse. Sabina Higgins' prophetic voice for peace talk between Morocco and Kiev is subdued by all-powerful support for the war. This raises the question of, where is the Republic of Conscience? London and Washington blocked 3 efforts of a negotiated peace settlement between Moscow and Kiev. As Bertolt Brecht said during World War II, the first casualty of war is truth. Ireland, in its generosity and obligation towards who fled the war, had opened doors to Ukrainian refugees, but it failed in its fundamental duty to stop the war, nor did it take sufficient effort to bring it to an end. This is the prophetic challenge all faiths have today. Refugees in Ireland are not simply a collection of different identities, but they embody the scars of war. The survivors of war are messengers of peace. If Ireland has a genuine concern for refugees, they should launch an anti-war campaign and call for peace talk. Can the faith communities persuade and mobilize society to exert such pressure on the government of Ireland? Yes, because as Pluto said, silence is complicit. This is the challenge we face today. Thank you, Jyoti. Over to you.
one insight I would like to reiterate, that is our histories are interwoven. Our next speaker is Professor Andrew Pierce from the Irish School of Ecumenics, School of Religion, Theology and Peace Studies, and Ecumenical Theologian. Thank you so much, Andrew. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jude. The perspective that informs my remarks is Christian, ecumenical, and Anglican, with a small a, possibly a very small a. And perhaps it's that collection of religious adjectives which, taken together, offer the possibility of being simultaneously part of both a demographic majority and a minority. Maybe that personal diversity is why I want to begin with the question about our understandings of our identities. In this college, in Trinity in the 1980s, one of those who introduced us to Christian theology was the kind, courteous, and deeply unsettling scholar Dennis Carroll, who, although sadly no longer with us, is recalled with great affection by those whom he taught. One of Dennis's key questions, which he posed insistently and with an apologetic nod to its grammatical infelicity, was this: who is we? Who is we? We, or so it seemed to Dennis, can be more than a little cavalier when we speak of we and us and our. Of course, we have to talk about ourselves betimes, but how we do so is more difficult than we might like to acknowledge. And it's not about an everlasting pilgrimage into subjectivity and getting into a disconnected state. This is a political act. And furthermore, I think what Dennis was highlighting was that this kind of incontinence in relation to identity claims is very much to the fore when we talk about our nationality and our religion, and how in doing so we connect or separate or blend the two. So where religion is concerned, this island has some significant legacy issues, which Nozan enumerated. And as someone else once said about something else, perhaps, these haven't gone away, you know. In recent years, the Irish School of Ecumenics contributed to an intensive module that was offered to students from Syracuse University in the States. And the students who came were concerned with religiously sanctioned divisions in Ireland, or what they believed to be religiously sanctioned divisions in Ireland, both north and south of the border. And in their questions to us and in the program they followed, they would highlight how in very many medium-sized towns, family names over shops would advert to ethno-religious difference. The town would usually contain 2 church buildings, and if there was a third or a fourth, they would look much less, quote unquote, like a church, as well as 2 sets of schools and 2 sets of sports facilities. And our visiting students would observe all of this, and they would say, what a very divided society this is. How binary are its divisions, and how very religious those binaries. And if they made that kind of remark to people who dwelt in towns south of the border, they would receive one of 2 replies. Either they would be told that we are not like that down here, or they would be told that we are not like that anymore. So the questions posed and the assumptions worked with by the visiting students were useful. Because for those of us who've grown up on this island, the very architecture of division is part of a very familiar background, something that has become as much a habit as a deliberated stance. Now, not seeing the obvious is one expression of denial. but seeing it in the reductionist terms of a religious binary. It's reductionist both because it's over-focused on religious, and it's also reductionist because it's thinking this or that, us and them. That manifests another form of denial, because we don't all share one identity, and neither do they. So who then is we? One of the most suggestive treatments of this topic dates back to the late 1920s, when the theologian Richard Niebuhr published a study of the social sources of denominationalism in the Christian churches in the USA. And this still makes for disquieting reading, or at least it should. Ask the churches to account for their difference or differences, Niebuhr observed, and their answer will be in steadfastly denominational terms. Roman Catholics will mention the papacy, Lutherans will speak of justification, Orthodox will talk of subornost, Roman Catholics, Methodists will talk about holiness, and so forth. But what these official answers won't include, however, will be two very large elephants that occupy much of the room, namely ethnicity and class. Now, in the light of Niebuhr's work, which had a big impact, a great deal of very early ecumenical theology addressed itself to what were first of all called non-theological factors in religious identity, but which later came to be given the much more accurate name of non-doctrinal factors. These are the factors that denote culturally embedded norms that can be every bit as dogmatic as any religious claim, and that may even prove capable of trumping or even subverting religious imperatives in the name of some other experience of we, us, and our. Now, offering an ecumenical alternative to denominationalism on this island, which according to Niebuhr is not simply a sociological reality, rather it is judged to be an expression of the moral failure of Christianity. That requires that we develop some way of thinking theologically in which we attend closely to the many different ways in which we are different, and about which we tell stories about who we are and who we are not, and why this is so. So I think I'll stop there, Jude, for now.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for raising this most important question: who are we and who are they? And let's move on to the second round. As we have taken more than 5 minutes each, the insights were useful. Of course, we also in a way intimated what are the responses, but we want to elaborate upon them somewhat. I would like to invite our panel to start with the responses to these challenges or the opportunities that are there in the changing landscape of faith. And our first respondent will be Reverend Mio-san Kodo. Would you kindly, each one of you, spend only 3 minutes, please, so that we can have a conversation with those who are listening to us. Mio-san, over to you.
Thank you. And no thank you for choosing me first. Yeah, I am entirely unprepared to. So this is called thinking on your feet, I guess. So thanks, Jude. I really enjoyed listening to everybody's observations, thoughtful and considered observations. I think we're focusing here on the change aspect in the question, and it's a moment of great change within the country, within Ireland, and you can feel the tectonic plates that we've been standing on for a long time are shifting. And we can see, you know, even the narratives around imagining a new political dispensation for the country. We see those kind of political and civic realities drawing on the argument of religious identity and the realities of religious identity, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland. I want to suggest that that in a multi-faith Ireland, in a multi-identity Ireland, that the commonality is the word Ireland. It's a geographical reality that's inescapable. And I want to tease out the question around native and migrant as well, that, you know, this is a question that's operating on different levels. It includes the realities of racism in Ireland and the realities of Islamophobia in Ireland, which are experienced by individuals and to which the mainstream audience and narrative it is in their interest to be blind to, for example, you know, not to acknowledge the racism within Irish society and the Islamophobia here. So in this multi-faith Ireland, a new type of secular space has to be imagined, because I know speaking to a group of religious people to suggest that secularism has something to offer us may not be popular, and because this is quite distinct from what Kathleen, I think, importantly outlined, which was the and indeed Shifana also talked about, which was this militant fundamentalist secularism. So this secularism 2.0 provides a space in which multiple identities can play out. It reminds me of the concept in Japanese culture of mu, and this space, empty space in a way, that allows, as is important in flower arranging in Ikebana, for example, and other art forms within the Japanese culture. You can tell my form of Buddhism comes from Japan. But of course, one of the dangers of a secular space, or of a it's not mu, it's ma, that's the title, ma, that use of empty space. One of the dangers is to actually believe that it is a value-free space. That's one of the dangers of secularity and of ma, that empty space is always never fully empty. However, let me just suggest and wrap up by suggesting that that still we have privileged positions for Christianity in Ireland, and if I was Christian, I would be blind to that too. But if I am Muslim, if I am Hindu, if I am Jewish, or if I am Buddhist, I have a unique seat where I'm viewing Ireland from that seat, and I can see that there is exclusion still happening. And we just have to look at education, primary education system, for example, which has over 90% of our primary education in the South is still under church influence. So I'm going to leave it at that. So let me suggest to all our, to everyone here, that secularity, a new and a reimagined secularity, has something to offer us, and it might be vital in ensuring the baby doesn't get thrown out with the bathwater. Thanks.
Much, Mia-san. Adrian, responses and opportunities in this uncharted territory.
I was reflecting on what's been said, and some of the challenging questions that were asked. And maybe I'll just give an example of a project that the Interfaith Forum developed about 5, maybe 6 years ago now in December. In 2016, the then Lord Mayor of Dublin, Brendan Carr, challenged the forum and asked us to work together with his office and develop an interfaith charter, a document that would recognize the priority of the common good and of the civic encounter, with a basis for free exercise of religious belief, customs and practice, and the invitation to accept freedom of others to do the same. This charter, it took us around, I don't know, 6 months to agree on everything. But eventually we had the document together, and it was probably the first of its kind in Europe, because the Council of Europe took it and put it up on their website very shortly after we launched it. And it's a document that, through a number of principles, promotes the dialogue between different communities of belief that are in our city. And this word, our, is important because the city is a shared activity, a shared organic human construction project. And the sharing of our experiences, the telling of our stories, and all this will strengthen our collaboration and partnership, and will enable us to hopefully build a better place for us. This, the outcome of the dialogue between people from different faiths in all spheres of life, is probably a way to eradicating misunderstanding, intolerance, exclusion, along with the extension of openness, respect, and understanding between our diverse faith communities. But most of all, the purpose of this charter is not to get people into buildings for religious worship, but to contribute to community cohesion, to elimination of racism, as has been mentioned, hate crime, and to enable interpersonal understanding and the common good in a civic space and to a civic purpose. And it does offer us a timely corrective to the exclusive individualism that stalks the corridors of most of our institutional religions. It forces us into the open air, into the bright light and the clouded skies of our cities and towns and countryside, where ignorance remains an opportunity for incomprehension every bit as much as multiculturalism has become an opportunity for integration. So I'll just finish here.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for focusing on the practical aspects. Kathleen, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jude. Thank you, everybody. I'll just, in terms of recommendations and to some of the issues that I myself gave rise to on mission beyond from Ireland, I would say that I would be recommending that we make known in our country, make an effort to make known in our country a little bit more the contribution of Irish faith-based, faith-inspired missionaries in so many parts of the world. There have been a few books on that, but truly they're not often read and often not sought. And I'd say they're in very few of our libraries, in our universities. Because I think also making known these stories, these true life stories, and not only what people did, but what inspired them, can help counter the negativity towards the church, towards faith, towards religion. And it can help to tell some of the good news, not only the bad that we constantly hear in Ireland today. Another recommendation I would say is Catholic social teaching. I think it has, its emphasis is on the common good, solidarity, subsidiarity. It's a great resource for all, including secular-based development work. Poverty, inequality, and social injustice, they're closely linked to the whole climate crisis that we're presently suffering in our world, and that at least now we're all aware of. And Pope Francis continuously reminds us that they're all linked. And so I recommend that really we would make known that corpus of Catholic social teaching in our country and in our universities. And again, I just was aware that we're here celebrating 50 years of the Irish School of Ecumenics. So I thought, well, there are recommendations that the ISE could certainly do something about both of those. And certainly could also look more closely at the whole relationship of mission and development, or mission versus development, as is often a topic for debate. Another one on the whole recommendation of mission, I think that increase our collaboration as missionaries and as church with others. There are so many committed groups and so many movements that share the main values of the Christian faith, even if they don't explicitly claim to be Christian, identify themselves as Christian. So as Christians, and indeed even as people of faith, it's good to reach out and network, collaborate, work closely with these groups, women's groups, youth groups, care of the earth groups, people who are working with migrants and refugees, people working with victims of human trafficking, people working with the homeless, working for peace in Northern Ireland and beyond, and with all these many other committed groups, because together we contribute to fostering what Christians would call that reign of God, of justice and of peace. Even if others don't use that terminology, and there is no need for others to use that terminology, we all seek that in society. And I mean, you spoke about the good in the secular society that there is an awful lot of good here in Ireland. An awful lot of those values are there. People may have been disappointed by religiosity, but still seek something more profound, more deeper, and certainly the common good, I think, is sought by us all. So collaborating and networking, whatever our inspiration, I think is very important. And then also, I think, on mission, opening our doors to missionaries from other countries, not to come here to fill the gaps that the lack of priests or whatever have given rise to, but to reach out and to be missionaries in this country, reaching out to the so many people who are on the margins. And so too, helping us to become a more relevant, dynamic, inclusive community of faith and indeed of faiths. And I just wonder too, I think it's a challenge for us in Ireland, maybe will we accept missionaries, because racism is deep, and even as church and as missionaries, we think that we have to give, but we don't really have to receive here in Ireland. The Spiritans, the Spiritan Fathers, they run an orientation program of preparation for missionaries coming to Ireland. Again, I would be recommending that the Irish School of Ecumenics could do something in that regard. So as to prepare people who come on mission here to be more prepared really to work in this context in which we find ourselves. As a woman and a female religious, my recommendations, I'd say that the issues raised by the revelations of abuse in religious life, and also on the role of women now in religion and in our patriarchal church, my recommendation there is simply honest conversations at all levels towards healing and towards a new way of being church, community of faith, community of Ireland. And I think some of those conversations too can be facilitated by institutes such as the Irish School of Ecumenics. Not always just looking at theory, but looking at what the spiritualities and within. And we're already having conversations, or we have had conversations among women religious in this country. We had 3 where we shared our hurts, we shared also our dreams, we shared our failures as well as our positives. And both with the past and with the institution of the church. And again, they have been very life-giving conversations. We had 3 last year among quite a number of women religious. And we have started now also having conversations with the bishops. 10 women religious and 10 bishops are having ongoing conversations. And overall, again, it is looking at that and how we can become a more inclusive, dynamic, relevant church, life-giving church for all of us. And I think that too is a recommendation, just to continue such things, and in whatever way we can to facilitate conversations among people about the hurts, about the dreams, and in that way too we can find how we can be a more wholesome, life-giving community for us all. In terms of dialogue, I would just add that I think certainly, again, the Irish School of Ecumenics could help bring faith communities to dialogue on what is the role of faith communities in this country today, and this Ireland, and how can we as faith communities move closer together on achieving it. At the meetings that we held, people spoke about our role in highlighting values and ethics in society as faith communities, supporting the welfare of everyone, especially those in need, speaking out as faith communities against the overriding, what was called in the synod responses that we got from people of other faiths, the overriding money tourism in our society, to speak out as faith communities if we see what is wrong. For example, to ask, because love is what inspires most of us in our faith communities, are we really loving each other? If the state is failing to provide adequate housing, if the banks are making an indecent profit, and so on. So again, challenging on that, speaking out, being the voice of those who we see that suffer. And also working together as faith communities on social issues. And there are so many here in our country, again, the arrival of refugees, climate justice, social action, restorative justice for those who have been affected by crime or tragedy, and so on, healing for victims of abuse. There are many ways in which we can and we need to work together as people of faith. And also, as well as responding to social justice issues, we have the opportunity to speak of the religious dimension of life, as people are searching for meaning and purpose in life at this moment in history. And that we have a spiritual role as faith communities in coming together. And again, the recommendation is to facilitate that we might do that more wholesomely. So I think I will leave it there. I've taken more.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much for reiterating the need for conversations and more interactions and openness. Over to you, Shifana.
Yes, thank you. So despite religion's role in building nationalistic sentiments in Ireland, it also played a role in oppressing people in the past. As a result, religion can either be complicit or active participant in crimes. However, the solution is not disengagement. It is not to cancel religion, since polemical rejection of religion is not a political category. To participate in national politics, faith communities can't be forced to leave their religion. When engaging in this discourse, religion and state should stay separate, but the prophetic voice should not be subdued. Enlightened hearts and minds shouldn't be ridiculed. This is at least the essence of democracy. I'm glad to see women asserting themselves and fighting for their rights in power politics, as sometimes institutions are designed to oppress us. We are claiming our autonomy and marking our presence in places that previously banned us. This also opened up a space to talk about reproductive rights, environmental issues, mental health, queer rights, minority rights, and other demands like housing, rising cost of living, etc. It is necessary to confront the religious people and religious institutions for their oppressive religious belief structures. It is also equally necessary to promote the prophetic and enlightened voices as a process of reconstruction, reimagination, and recovery. Otherwise, a mere critique of religion will give rise to uncritical secular fundamentalism that has no consciousness but impose the tyranny of the market and the belief in war. While ridiculing anything to do with religion, a new set of false god is brought to the public domain. In that, faith has to be lived in the secular world in transforming this world into a better place. As Hamid Dabashi says, world religions are religions of the world. As Pedro Casaldaliga says, there is only one path to heaven, and that is this world. As an example, the church in South America helped organize the Christian communities to resist dictatorships and the tyranny of the market, resisting centuries-old colonialism and neocolonialism. With the cosmovision of indigenous masses, the president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, the first indigenous president, has launched a campaign to ban NATO with the support of many faith communities. The mosque in Cairo organized people against Hosni Mubarak. The rabbis are now increasingly preaching in the synagogue to explain Israel's settler colonial nature. And Dalits have their own temple defying the caste system and resisting the caste oppression. Faith informs one that individuals are not the centerpiece of all relationship. It emphasizes that I exist because we coexist. I am because we are. Finally, for me as an Asian, brown-skinned, hijab-wearing, practicing Muslim woman, belonging and reaching beyond are places where everyone can forget that I am an Asian, brown-skinned, hijab-wearing, practicing woman, period. For me to be accepted, I need to break all of these labels. It doesn't mean I stop being those things. To assert my rights, I voice, and to assert my rights, voice and present, I need all these identities, labels, and baggage, and all this at this moment of the history. Again, I reiterate that I call Ireland my home, a home I never had. I see Ireland as a home of the oppressed people, no matter who they are. And I end this with a biblical quote saying, "You were slaves in Egypt. There shall not be slaves amongst you." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shifana, for that thoughtful, reflections. Andrew. 3 minutes, Andrew. Sorry.
Thank you, Jude, and thank you, everybody else. It's been very, very interesting to listen to. In the first round, I put a question mark against how we sometimes explain ourselves, both to ourselves and to others. And I think the importance of facing these questions goes to the very heart of an Irish ecumenical imagination, if it is trying to envisage genuinely ecumenical alternatives to the omnipresent legacy and quite exhausting present realities of denominationalism. It's a task requiring contextual sensitivity. The elephants that Niebuhr detected amongst Christianities in 1920s America, ethnicity and class, are also here, very often in denominational camouflage, and they're an inevitable byproduct of how Irish Christianity's internal divisions have been fundamentally shaped by the experience of settler colonialism and its protracted tribal hangover in the Irish churches. So the question then is, how might we, where we are ecumenical Christians from a range of backgrounds, how might we take seriously this context we've inherited and which we are continuing to shape? How do we acknowledge the legacy of tribalized denominational divisions? And that's an ecumenical imperative. Sectarian isms, however diluted, are intrinsically toxic and they need to be taken seriously. And yet at the same time, we have to prevent our engagement with sectarian Christian identities from reinscribing a sense that these really are the question, the ecumenical question, so that even by addressing our pathologies, we end up excluding those who draw their sense of identity from other narratives, including those that are also religious in inspiration. We have problems here. We have problems belonging in a sufficiently inclusive way. We need to address those problems in ways that help us move beyond constricted belongings. Out of curiosity, I recently found myself looking at church websites and considering some of the many ways in which large numbers of parishes, dioceses, congregations, and church-aligned NGOs have developed relationships with churches and faith communities in much poorer parts of the world. In some cases, these partnerships are with other parishes and communities in Ireland. In some cases, with parishes and communities abroad. In some cases, both. And this kind of relationship building, of course, is good and it's hopeful. But, and this is something that one of our questioners has put into the chat, it's very noticeable that these structured relationships seem to have a problem in reaching any further north than Dundalk. So much energy is attracted by questions of national identity, the national we question, when so many other aspects of that we are far from straightforward. It's also strange that the language of reconciliation is so popular and so regularly commended when so many of its prior enabling conditions are staggeringly absent. You can't do everything at once, of course, but perhaps one thing that can be done as a constructive step, and that perhaps should be done by churches with one another on this island is simply to befriend one another, much as they do other communities in other parts of the globe. In a divided society, and particularly on a divided island, where some divisions conceal others, ecumenical movement occurs when the pain caused by Christian disunity is able to name itself, acknowledge its wider complicities, and set about repenting of a sanctified but limited belonging. We speak in Christianity of the importance and centrality of communion with one another, but looking south to north, in very few cases have we even begun to establish friendship. So, in the name of going beyond and perhaps finding that we belong there too, we may find ourselves looking to friendship that will construct a broader place than we had hitherto imagined. Thank you, Jude.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Now, we do not have very many questions. You are most welcome to put any question on the chat box. Otherwise, I would like to kindly request each of our panelists to make 1 minute reflection to reiterate a point that you feel within your heart and mind that should be restated. Adrian?
Maybe a couple of questions, if that's okay. Over the past number of years, I've been fortunate enough to take part in this course and unfolding in various international and regional forums dedicated to new ways of thinking and talking about religion and its role in society. More generally, framing it as a conscious move from seeing religion as part of the problem to part of the solution to our collective problem. Being too simplistic is too simplistic. And given the complexity and the multi-layer nature of the topic, there's no doubt any reflections would raise as many questions as they answer. So namely, if we assume that religion beyond personal inspiration can make important contributions to the quality and the policy-making process, then what are the implications for the engagement of policymakers and public officials at local levels of society with religious actors? This is through the context of the work that we do in the Interfaith Forum. And that is because some of us are learning about some of the conditions which would enable a values-led dialogue, inclusive of religious traditions, within the wider project of reimagining multilateralism and making the multilateral local policies purpose. So the question is, do we need new structures? Do we need new partnerships, new approaches, new methods for engaging the religious and the secular world of policymaking?
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. Kathleen?
Yeah, thanks, Jude. Thanks for this evening. I found it all very interesting. And it's such a broad topic. We can take it from so many different perspectives because it touches us all in so many ways. But just faith in a changing Ireland. There is still a lot of faith in Ireland. I think certainly we see that at times of tragedy and of loss, people particularly turn to their faith community. People, the institutional church, which of course the Catholic Church was the biggest and still is, Adrian gave the statistics, is challenged and must change. And I think when we know we have to change, we're in a very healthy place. And we're also as faith communities, all seeking to somehow be more relevant and offer that response. But I suppose, and in summary, I would like to think that it's faith in a changing Ireland, that changing Ireland, or that we're moving towards, will not be one where there is no faith, but that the faith that we share, and each of us coming from it from a different, but we share faith in God, and in God of love, God of peace, God of justice, in whatever way we understand that. But that justice and love is the goal, I think, that we would like to see here in our country and in our world, and that as it changes, that faith may be something that will contribute to that, and that it will not be a changed Ireland without faith. I would not like to see that faithless Ireland, and I don't think we're moving in that direction.
Thank you, Kathleen. Shifana?
Yeah, one thing I would like to actually know is how to live like a full human being with all my rights intact. Because as a woman, like I said, as a Asian, brown skin, hijab wearing Muslim woman, I don't know how it is to live a life of all my rights, recognized as a person. And I really don't know how it feels. I don't think even Kathleen knows, because she's a woman. Or we have been, discriminated in so many levels. We have been disconnected from that discourse. Like we feel, we don't feel full because we don't have it. We have not been granted. We've been fighting for it. And religion has obviously played a greater part in this in our oppression. So I like to see where people like me and Kathleen could also be confident, not confident, also come up and, feel what we have been denied for centuries. That is what it is to be a full human being. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shifana. Thank you. Andrew?
It's been very interesting listening to everything. One of the points that Mjøsan made in favor of secularity is something I'd want to echo even in his absence. I think it was the Dutch Dominican Edvard Schielebeeks who said that secularization is the means by which God tries to get us out of some of our worst habits. There's been a very often secularization has functioned as an appalling sort of the whipping boy for lazy religion, and it's not really a good enough thing. But one of the ways in which the religions, in terms of what you said of posing the question structurally, is actually how, certainly in this jurisdiction, the development of state exams that study religion at junior and leaving certificate level has been a really important resource for public discourse in relation to these kinds of things. That this syllabus, both at the junior and at the leaving certificate, is really challenging people to become, curious and empathetic citizens with an eye on the religious question, regardless of whether the faith component is something that speaks to them or not at this stage in their life. And it's a quite glorious resource. And we're beginning to see it now in college, of seeing people who've had the opportunity to study this, either taking themselves as far as junior certificate, or perhaps the next couple of years, that it has given them a handle on these kinds of issues that perhaps earlier generations did not have when they were being encouraged to think about or act about these kinds of questions. So, with great thanks to the state, the people who have invested pedagogical time and energy in getting us to the point. Obviously, there are questions about it, and you, Jude, I know, have been very helpful in getting us to think that religions involves more than just the ones we're familiar with, and getting us to see something of the bigger complexity that is part of the complexity of life on this island. But it is something that's really important for us to have that degree of resourcing in being able to think about what it is to have or not have a religious identity and how that comes into play with other people who have or do not have such identities.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Now I hand over the floor to Jin to announce our next webinar of the ISC 50th anniversary celebration program. Over to you, Jin.
Great, thank you very much, Jude. So our next webinar will be on the 26th of January 2023, next year at 5 p.m. With the theme of religion, peace, and conflict on the island of Ireland and beyond. So it's a continuing conversation and also, again, marking a momentous response to the challenges and opportunity, again, the reinvigorated and fill in contextual theologies and interfaith relations. So I hope to see you all next year, again, 26th of January at 5 p.m. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jin. And thank you, Mio-san, Absentia, Adrian, Kathleen, Shifana, Andrew. Though you are not representing all the voices in Ireland, you captured to a great extent the yearnings of human and divine within us, amongst us. If at all I want to say what faith is, whether it is expressed in secular terms or religious terms, indigenous terms, it is the faith that hopes for freedom, dignity, justice, and care for the planet. And these are the topics we discuss in the MPhil in contextual theologies and interfaith relations. They are not only theoretical discussions, as Kathleen rightly reiterated. They are engaged conversations that give us not only knowledge, but also wisdom and power to engage and relate, as Andrew concluded. It is important that we make friends. Thank you, Jin. Thank you, Dermot. And thank you very much, Shifana, Mio-san, Adrian, Kathleen, Andrew. And thank you very much for all those who were participating throughout these 1.5 hours. Let's meet again in the month of January. Have a good evening.